Buddha's 7 qualities of a true person. 6 are not in books. There is a passage where the Buddha talks about the 7 qualities of what he calls a true person or a person of integrity. The Pali term is sapurisa. These qualities are basically different aspects of discernment. Of the 7, only one of them has to do with something you can learn through words, and that's having a sense of the Dhamma. You learn what the Buddha taught. You learn what the Ajahns taught. The other qualities have to do with developing your own sensitivity as to how to use these teachings. The second quality starts right in with atha, which means goal, meaning purpose. In other words, understanding what the Dhamma is for. People can read books and explain the words, but that on its own doesn't really get to what the Dhamma is for. It's for liberation. The Buddha says that release is both the essence of the Dhamma and it's also its flavor. The Pali term for essence is heartwood or sara. It's the real core or the real solid part of the Dhamma in that it leads to release. As for the flavor, you listen to the Dhamma and it should have a flavor that helps inspire you to put down your burdens. And how do you do that? That's something that you've got to learn for yourself. We have all the instructions, 16 steps of breath meditation. It seems like a lot. But when you actually look at them, they don't explain very much. There are a lot of issues where they require you to develop your own sensitivity. The Buddha says to breathe in a way that gives rise to rapture, or to breathe in a way that gives rise to pleasure. How do you do that? He doesn't say. How do you breathe in a way that makes you aware of the whole body? He doesn't say. All of these are areas where you move beyond the discernment that comes from listening or reading and into the discernment that comes from thinking and developing. In other words, you have to think about the questions. The Buddha poses the questions, so you think about them, come up with some hypotheses, and then test them. Then you evaluate the results. Are they good? Are they useful? This is a large part of what sensitivity in the Dhamma means. Combining your thinking and your developing of qualities in the mind so that you can gain a real sense of what the Dhamma is for. You find that it does lift some of the burdens off your mind. It makes you a more reliable person, a person you can trust. Because there's another part of sensitivity as well. How well can you trust your intuitions? You've got to be able to judge them. Think of a John Moon out in the forest. He was getting all these visions. Sometimes there would be devas or other beings coming and telling him that he should practice this way, practice that way. If he had believed everything he saw, he would have gone crazy. He realized that he had to learn how to forget about whether it was a deva or whatever giving the lesson. He had to look at the lesson itself. To what extent did it fit in with what he already knew about the Dhamma? And if it looked like it might fit, then he'd give it a try. But even then, he didn't believe 100% that this was how it had to be. He had to evaluate the results objectively without giving in to his preferences. That's how he developed his sensitivity. This is one of the reasons why the Buddha told Rahula, before he started breath meditation, make your mind like earth. The more non-reactive you can be, the more you see things, and the better judge you are of the various experiments that you do. Then the remaining 5 qualities, beyond having a sense of the Dhamma and a sense of its meaning, have to do with the different aspects of the practice that accompany the meditation. Having a sense of yourself is the next quality. It means having a sense of where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, where work needs to be done, and being willing to do it. Think of that old statement that the great way is not difficult for those with no preferences. It doesn't mean you don't have any preference for, say, happiness over suffering. You do prefer happiness. The issue of preferences has to do with the means. What do you have to do to gain that happiness? There are certain things that you've got to do if you're going to find true happiness and release, and some of them go against the grain. Contemplation of the body. A lot of people don't like that. The various ascetic practices, restraint of the senses, They go against the grain. Some people complain that these practices are unnatural. Well, yes, there is something unnatural about them, but then look where nature goes. Birth, aging, death. Birth, aging, death. Birth, aging, death. That's natural. We're trying to go against that. We're finding something that is there. It's not that we're creating something out of nothing, but a lot of our natural tendencies, the ones that are really habitual, are not going to take us all the way to release. Some people say, well, just naturally relax. Everyone likes to relax, but you relax for a while and then it gets dull and you want some entertainment. A lay teacher once said, having a hand that's relaxed is much nicer than having a hand that's tight, curled up in a fist. That's the hand's natural position. But a hand that stays relaxed and doesn't move is a dead hand. The nature of the body is that it goes back and forth between tension and relaxation, but the mind doesn't have to go back and forth with the body. And that's what we're working on, an independent mind. So if you notice that you have problems with lust, okay, contemplate the body. See exactly what is worthy of lust and why the mind wants to lust to begin with. The body is not the problem, but looking at its unattractive side at least helps to clear one of the issues out of the way. The mind is going to say, that really is beautiful. How can I not lust for it? So you look into it. Where is it really beautiful? And where is it not? And what things come along with it? This way, as the body gets less and less prominent, the issue of the lust in and of itself becomes more prominent. That's when you can deal with it directly. Why do you want the perceptions that give rise to lust? So, whatever your problem is, there is an antidote. All too often, our problem is that we don't like the antidote, so we pretend that it's not a problem. You need to admit the problem before you can solve it, which is why having a sense of yourself is an important part of gaining discernment. Another quality is having a sense of enough. How much food is enough? How much sleep is enough? How much staying with tranquility is enough? To what extent do you have to start working on insight? At what point does the insight work become counterproductive? In other words, you don't have the strength of concentration to carry it through. Ajahn Mahabua talks about this a lot. He says that you find that when you've sharpened your knife in concentration and then you use it, it's going to get dull. You've got to sharpen it again. But if you just stay with a sharpened knife and don't use it, then that's not worthwhile either. So, as you go through the day, ask yourself, how much sleep is enough? How much walking meditation is enough? This is something that no one else can tell you. You've got to figure it out for yourself. You may learn some ideas from other people. One that I've found is that you want at least one good long session of meditation every day, but also learn how to break up your other sessions into different lengths. Give yourself some variety. Then there's the question of having a sense of the right time and the right place. When is the right time and place to talk? When is the right time and place to be quiet? You've got to be sensitive to these things, especially when you're living in a community. That point deals directly with the next two, the sixth and the seventh aspects of discernment. One is having a sense of groups of people when you enter them. What kind of behavior is appropriate for this group of people? What kind of behavior is appropriate for that group of people? With some people, you have to use a certain level of language. With other people, you have to use another level. With some people, there are certain topics that you can talk about. With others, there are topics that you have to stay away from. When you have a sense of communities of people like this, then it's a lot easier to practice. All too often, we simply want to say what we want to say without thinking about what kind of impact it's going to have on the long-term health of the community. But you have to think about these things if you want the community to be a good group to practice with. And finally, there's the sense of which people are worth hanging around with. The Buddha says you want to hang around with people who are interested in the Dhamma. They not only listen to it, but they like to think about it. They like to discuss it, but not too much. That's when you get back to the issue of how much and the right time and place. There are way too many Dhamma discussions down at the guest house, down at the kitchen. We're living here as a group and we want to be able to help one another find some quiet. And then carefully choose the people you want to hang around with. This is especially important as you leave the monastery. You're going to be willy-nilly dealing with all kinds of people, but who are the people to whom you go for advice? Who are the people you want to emulate? Who are the people whose point of view you want to develop? You have to develop a sense of this. And as I said, the Buddha doesn't give many instructions in these areas, but he does raise the issues, and that's important. All too often, we don't even think about these things. We look at our life in other terms, ask other questions. So learn how to ask yourself questions about these things. Now that you've learned the Dhamma, what's it for? And how do you head in that direction? In terms of finding the right time, having a sense of yourself, having a sense of how much is enough, having a sense of which people you should hang out with, and how you should treat the various groups of people you encounter. It's good that these questions are raised. You think about them in terms of where they're going to lead, in terms of that goal of the Dhamma. The most important one of these is that second one, the atha, the goal, the purpose of the practice, because that's where the essence lies. That's where the real flavor of this practice lies, the extent to which the mind can be released. So think about these issues, test them in your life, and then contemplate the results. This is how your discernment grows from simply knowledge of the Dhamma to real knowledge of what it's all for. Thinking and developing and thinking again about what you've developed and then developing things some more. There's a back and forth between the two processes. That's how your sensitivity grows, and your sensitivity is the essence of discernment if you push it in the right direction. So even though it's a natural process, it's a natural goal that we're aiming for, in the sense that it's something there in nature. We have to question what has seemed to be our natural way of doing things up to now, and subject that natural way to the Buddha's questions. That way, we can head in a direction we've never been before, learn something we never learned before, experience something we never experienced before. And that comes from doing things we've never done before. So keep these issues in mind, because they make you sensitive in the areas that really will bear fruit. Sensitive in 7 ways. There are 7 qualities that the Buddha said make you a true person. The Pali term here, sapurisa, can mean a person of integrity or just an all-around, well-trained person, a full human being. And most of the qualities deal with things you have to observe for yourself. The 7 qualities start with having a sense of the Dhamma and then having a sense of meaning. The word for meaning, atha, can mean at least 3 things: the meaning of the words, the goal to which they're directed, and the benefits of working toward that goal. The other qualities are having a sense of yourself, having a sense of how much is enough, having a sense of the right time and place for things, having a sense of how to approach different groups of people, and then having a sense of how to judge people as to whether they're worthwhile hanging around with. The one quality you can actually learn just through words is the first one, having a sense of the Dhamma. You read up on the Dhamma, you learn what the Buddha has to say. But from that point on, you have to use your powers of observation, the other qualities you develop partly through living with people who already have those qualities. In other words, you observe them, see how they handle different situations. But even then, it comes down to your being observant. As the Buddha said, some people are like the tongue that tastes the soup, and others are like the spoon that sits in the soup. The spoon can sit in there for years and have no idea of what the soup tastes like. It's possible to be around people who have a lot of sensitivity, but you may not be as sensitive as they are, so you miss a lot of things. This is one of the reasons why the Buddha said that when he was looking for a student, there were 2 qualities he was interested in. One was that the person be truthful, and the other was that the person be observant. This means being observant of your own actions and also of the actions of the people around you. These qualities apply both outside and inside. For example, having a sense of the meaning. Some of this you can pick up by asking other people, what does this passage mean? But other times you have to practice for yourself. When the Buddha says concentration, what is concentration like? It's not just a word, and the meaning is not just in its definition. It's in the actual quality of the mind. When the Buddha talks about being generous, when he talks about having goodwill, it's not just in the words. You want to see what those words are for, the quality inside your own mind that they're pointing at. They're giving you pointers in where and how you can develop yourself. Having a sense of yourself means having a sense of where your strengths and weaknesses are, what kind of things you need to work on, what strengths you have inside that you can rely on to help you with your weak points. Having a sense of enough. The Buddha illustrates this with having a sense of what's enough food to eat, but it can also be explained in a lot of other ways. How much talking is enough? How much meditating is enough? How much money is enough? How many material objects do you need in order to live a happy life in which you can also practice the Dhamma? Basically, what this comes down to is having a sense of balance. You have to balance many different needs. There's the need for your income, but there's also a need to have time to practice. So you have to look around at the things you own. At what point are they enough? When you have a true sense of enough, you realize that you need less money than you thought you did. This means that you can work less at your job and devote more time to the Dhamma instead. But this point of enough is something each of us has to find for him or herself. You have to be observant. Having a sense of the right time and place means knowing when to approach people, when to leave them alone, when you can talk to them. Especially when you're going to be critical, when is the right time? You have to learn how to observe people carefully. Look into their eyes. Look into the situation around them and figure out what indicates whether they're going to be receptive or not, and what kind of words you can use that would be helpful. Years back, I was talking to a therapist. We got onto this issue of when to be critical with people and the things to look for before making critical comments. Is the person in a good mood? Is the person rested and well-fed? And the therapist said that it never occurred to him to think about those things. Of course, my thought, I didn't express it to him, was, how can you be a therapist if you're not sensitive to this? But even if you're not a therapist, you have to be sensitive to the people around you. People you have to live with, people who have power over you, people who you have power over. What's the right time and place to say pleasant things? What's the right time and place to say unpleasant things that would be helpful for the work or helpful for the relationship? You've got to learn how to observe these things for yourself. As for knowing groups of people, this is a matter of having had some experience with different types of people in different situations. When you're with this group of people, what kind of language do you use? What kind of body language do you use? There are rules you can read about. Miss Manners has books and books and books on manners. But still, a lot of it has to do with just noticing how people around you act. There's a great story from the book Ishi, the last wild Native American, in other words, the last one to be brought into white civilization. The rest of his family, the rest of his tribe, had died off. He decided to just let the white men kill him, so he walked onto a ranch, sat down by a fence, thought that they would shoot him and that would be the end of it. But they didn't. They actually found an anthropologist from Berkeley who knew his language and was able to talk with him. When he was done, the anthropologist said, "Okay, which Indian tribe would you like to live with?" And Ishi said, "I'd like to live with you." So the anthropologist brought him back to Berkeley and got him a job as a caretaker in the anthropology museum at the university. The anthropologist's wife wrote the book about Ishi, and one of the things she noticed was that even the very first day they invited Ishi to their house to eat, he had impeccable table manners. He didn't do anything until he saw what other people were doing. And after Ishi left, she gave her husband a lecture on his manners, saying, "You could learn from Ishi." This is the kind of person you want to be. When you go into a group of people, you should be sensitive to how they do things, how to talk to them, how to act with them. When you look in the Buddha's rules for the monks, you see that there are a lot of rules dealing with etiquette, little tiny things. But they're there because people often get upset by little tiny things. There are actually some laws that you can break and people don't get upset. You can drive faster than the speed limit and people usually don't get too upset. But if you say the wrong thing in the wrong company, even though it's not illegal, that's a problem. So you want to be very careful and observant of these things. It's part of your training, being sensitive and being observant. Because that moves into the next factor, which is learning how to judge people as to who are the best people to associate with. You want to look for people who have a respect for the Dhamma, people who don't just listen to the Dhamma, but who actually try to understand it. They don't just try to understand it, they try to practice it, and they encourage others to practice as well. A lot of your personality, your character, is going to be determined by the people you hang around with. You pick up their attitudes, you pick up their ideas. We live in different worlds of what the Buddha calls samadhi, which means agreements. It also means conventions and supposings. In other words, our conventions for how we do things. That group has this set of conventions. This group has these suppositions about what's important and what's not. And when you hang around people, you begin to pick up those attitudes and they seep into your mind. So you want to have a good sense of who the best people are to associate with. Of course, there are a lot of people in the world that you're going to have to associate with willy-nilly, but what the Buddha's talking about here are the people you go to for advice, the people you try to emulate. Be very careful in how you choose those people and be very observant. So the training of the Dhamma is not just a matter of sitting here with your eyes closed. There are times, most of the time really, when you need to have your eyes really wide open to observe what's going on both inside and out. That's because these 7 principles apply inside as well. If you're practicing meditation, 1, you want to know what the Dhamma has to say about what goes on in the mind, what to look out for. 2, as you're sitting and practicing, you have to figure out how to apply it to get the most benefit out of it. When this comes up in my mind, how does it get classed in the way the Buddha describes mental events? Is it something positive or something negative? And what should I do with it? When the Buddha's talking about rapture, for instance, that word can actually create a lot of false images in our minds. We tend to think of Saint Teresa going through ecstasies. In some cases, people do really have very intense rapture. But at other times, it's just a sense of refreshment. You sit here and every part of the body feels totally satisfied. The energy is just right. That sense of fullness and just rightness also counts as piti, which is translated as rapture. So you have to learn how to recognize these things. After all, only when you recognize them can you know what to do with them. The Buddha's instructions always have that dimension. He gives us working hypotheses, and they have the 2 dimensions. On the one hand, they're not just there as theory for us to think about and talk about, they're actually maps to help us know what to do. And on the other hand, they're not just instructions, saying do this, do that. They give us reasons for why we should do this or do that, what the benefits will be. Those lists of Dhammas in the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness, for example, they're there to help us figure out, when something comes up in the mind, what the most beneficial thing is to do with it. If you recognize that something is a hindrance, it's to be abandoned. If you recognize that something is a factor for awakening, it's to be developed. So the instructions come with imperatives. Of course, the Buddha's not imposing these imperatives on us. He wasn't posing as a god who could claim, well, I created you and therefore you have to do what I say. He's a fellow human being, but he's an expert fellow human being. He says, If you want to put an end to suffering, this is what you have to do. He doesn't force these things on us, but if you decide, okay, I'm suffering enough, then listen to his Dhamma and try to figure out what it's getting at. That's what the word atha means, what it's getting at, both in the sense of what it means and in the sense of the beneficial place where it's trying to get you to go. Then your practice will be a lot more on course. Another type of sensitivity the Buddha recommends developing inside is having a sense of yourself. What are your weaknesses when you sit down to meditate? Where are the places your mind tends to go that it shouldn't go? Are you lacking in mindfulness? Are you lacking in alertness? Is the problem with the mind or more with the body and the breath? Learn how to read yourself. Then try to compensate for your weaknesses by taking advantage of your strengths. After all, nobody's going to sit in your mind and tell you what to do. You're basically on a course of self-training. So if you're going to train yourself, you have to learn how to read yourself. Then the other qualities come in on this inner level as well. For instance, having a sense of how much is enough and having a sense of the right time. Right now, how much concentration is enough? How much pressure should you put on your breath? If you don't put any pressure at all, the mind is going to slip away. If you put too much, it gets restrictive. How much desire should you have, and where should you focus it? If you don't have enough desire, you sit here and daydream. If you have so much desire that you're not paying attention to what you're doing, that becomes a problem too. You have to learn how to modulate that, and again, how do you know? Well, with practice. What's the right time? When you get to the question of having a sense of the time and place, what's the right time to focus more on concentration? What's the right time to figure things out? One good rule of thumb is that if a problem comes up, you try to get the mind in concentration. You say, not now, but if it keeps coming back, you may tell yourself, maybe I do have to deal with this. And you deal with it as best you can, given the level of concentration and discernment you have. But if you find that you're just chopping away at the problem and nothing cuts through, it's a sign you're not ready for that yet. That's when you need to put up a wall with a sign that says, not now, we'll come back to this later. And you get back to the breath. As for groups of people, remember the committee in your mind. When greed, aversion, and delusion come in with their tender, sweet voices, how do you deal with them? When they come with their harsh voices, they're yelling at you, and as the Thais say, they're squeezing your nerves. What do? You need to have techniques for recognizing different groups of defilements and dealing with them effectively. And then finally, which voices in your mind should you be listening to right now? You notice as you're sitting here, some of the voices seem like you, some of them seem like other people, or maybe they've taken on your voice, but they're actually coming from somebody else with who knows what assumptions. How do you learn how to recognize when the assumptions behind some of the things being said in your mind are really not worth following at all, and which ones are more worth listening to? In other words, who are your true friends inside? That's something you've got to learn through using your powers of observation. Sometimes it seems as if the really strict voice in your mind is the Dhamma, but actually it's trying to push you off the path. It's trying to push you so hard that you can't stay on the path and you're going to leave. That's an especially tricky one. But there's also the voice that says, well, you know the middle way says not to push things too hard. Watch out for that one too, because as Ajahn Mahabhuwa says, our defilements have their middle way as well. It's right in the middle of the pillow. The Buddha's middle way means that you approach pain and pleasure in the appropriate way. You put up with some pains because you know that if you give in to the corresponding pleasures, it's going to be bad for the mind. You look at pains and pleasures as part of a causal fabric and not in terms of whether you like them or not. You say, if I indulge in this pleasure, where does it lead? If I indulge in that pain, where does it lead? Or if I inflict this pain on myself, where does it lead? These are the things you have to learn through practice. It's by finding the middle way in observing all these dimensions that you develop your discernment. The Buddha doesn't leave you totally adrift in learning these lessons. He points out areas where you have to pay attention and gives you appropriate questions to ask. Questions that help you learn the middle way for yourself. That's what the Dhamma is for. But when you know the Dhamma, knowing its meaning doesn't come automatically. I've been reading recently a number of writers who have picked up a little Pali, and they claim that they have discovered new meanings in the text that totally overturn what everybody thought the Buddha said. And you really have to know the text to know that they're squeezing the meaning in a strange way. So it's not automatic that once you read the text, you're going to understand them. Sometimes you come to them with who knows what agenda. This is why it's good to have training from somebody who's practiced, somebody who's trained. Then use your powers of observation to see what inside you needs to be developed, what needs to be abandoned, what's the right time and place, and how much is enough of a particular practice. How do you deal with the different committee members in your mind? Figure out which ones you should associate with and which ones you shouldn't. All this you have to learn by trial and error, but you don't want it to be just repeated trial and error. You want it to be trial and sometimes success. Success because you're observant. Remember those two qualities I mentioned at the beginning. As the Buddha said, let someone come who's observant and truthful, no deceiver, and I'll teach that person the Dhamma. This is how you teach yourself the Dhamma too, by being observant and truthful, and keeping these dimensions or these facets of what it means to be an all-around human being in mind. When you can do that, you can learn how to look after yourself. When they talk about carrying the practice into your life, this is how you do it. It's not just a matter of figuring out, how am I going to meditate all the time? It involves learning to look at these dimensions in your life, or looking at your life from the perspective of these dimensions, and keeping up the determination that you want to be as skillful as possible in all these aspects of becoming a true person. Why the Buddha put so much emphasis on choosing a good teacher. There's a term that the Buddha often yokes with the phrase, the noble ones, and that's people of integrity. A large part of the training is learning how to develop integrity. It's not just learning a few ideas or a few protocols. It's a quality of the heart, of your behavior, of your character, and it takes more than just understanding words to develop integrity. You need a well-directed intention and some good examples to absorb. There's a passage where the Buddha talks about 7 qualities of a person of integrity. Of the 7, 2 have to do with things that you can learn from books or from listening, but the other 5 have to do with things you can pick up only by being around people of integrity and trying to become a person of integrity yourself. The 2 qualities you can learn from books or from listening are knowledge of the Dhamma and knowledge of the meaning of the Dhamma. You can learn the Dhamma by listening and by reading, and a good part of the meaning you can pick up by trying to figure things out. Reading one sutta and then reading another one, comparing what they have to say, trying to get a sense of what the Buddha meant when he was talking about, say, suffering or emptiness or any of those big terms that play a major role in the way he taught. But even here, it really helps to live around a person who has practiced the Dhamma, for it helps to put your ideas about the purpose and meaning of the Dhamma into perspective. Emptiness may seem to mean one thing in the abstract, but when you sense emptiness as it's embodied in another person, it can mean something else entirely. As for the other 5 qualities, the first is having a sense of yourself, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, where you can trust yourself, where you can't trust yourself, where you need to work on yourself. You could look in a whole library of books, you could look through the entire internet, and you would never find that kind of knowledge. You have to look at yourself in action, and you also have to be around people of integrity, so you get a sense of where you do and don't measure up. and how they see where you do and don't measure up. It's not just a matter of your own opinion. You have to listen to their opinions, be sensitive to their standards. You have to read not only their words, but also their behavior and their body language. This is why the Buddha puts so much emphasis on choosing a good teacher. You want a teacher who has high standards and holds to them, lives by them. That way you get to pick up high standards too. The sense of your own strengths and weaknesses, and particularly this issue of where you can trust yourself and where you can't, takes a lot of time and sensitivity to develop. As the Buddha said, you have to be very observant and watch for a long time to gain this kind of knowledge. Another aspect of a person of integrity's knowledge is having a sense of time and place. Again, you can learn this only by being in lots of different times and lots of different places and being around someone who is sensitive to time and place to see how that person deals with these times and places. When's the time to speak? When's the time not to speak? When's the time to act? When's the time not to act? That's something you can pick up only by being around someone who has developed that kind of sensitivity. And it requires that you be sensitive too, that you be open to that person's influence. At the same time, you have to learn how to close yourself off to the influence of people who don't have that sense. Another aspect of integrity is having a sense of enough. How much is enough sleep? How much is enough food? How much is enough talk? How much is too little? You can extend these questions into all the areas of your life. And again, you can pick this up only by being around other people who have a sense of enough. It's all too easy to fall into a part of society where the values are really strange as to what constitutes enough. You hear about politicians who seem to be honest enough when you vote for them, but then they get into a different circle of friends or a different circle of society, and what was enough before is suddenly not enough. They stop being honest because they have to become two-faced in straddling two societies, showing one face to you and another to the society they want to inhabit, where there are different standards for what's worth competing over and what counts as success. So, again, you want to find someone who has a really clear sense of what's enough and what's not enough based on the Buddha's reflections on the requisites. How much food is really enough? How much clothing? How much shelter? How much medicine? Another aspect of integrity is having a sense of groups of people. The Buddha describes this as knowing how to behave around Brahmins, how to behave around noble warriors, and so forth. For us, this would include knowing how to behave around upper-class people, lower-class people, people with a lot of education, people with very little education. How do you talk to people less educated than you so that they won't feel you're talking down to them? How do you talk to people above you on the social scale so they won't feel you're after their money? More importantly, how do you talk with people? How do you behave toward them in a way that you can communicate with them but not get sucked into whatever weird values they may have? Having a sense of groups like this is not just a matter of being pleasing to them. It's also a matter of holding to your standards. How do you not get sucked into their standards? How do you do that in such a way that you're not cutting off all ties with those people? This is a delicate issue. To learn this, you have to be around the sort of person who has that kind of sense and demonstrates it in action. Finally, there's a sense of how to judge people. According to the Buddha's standards, you judge people by the extent to which they're really sincere in wanting to learn the Dhamma. Once they've learned the Dhamma, to what extent are they sincere in trying to understand it? Once they understand it, to what extent do they try to apply it to their lives? Those are the areas where you judge people. You don't judge them by their race. You don't judge them by their occupation. You don't judge them by their age. The whole point of this, of course, is that the standards you use to judge other people are the ones you want to use to judge yourself. To what extent are you sincerely interested in the Dhamma, sincerely interested in putting it into practice? These are values that you pick up by being around people who exemplify them, people who are people of integrity. This is one of the reasons why the relationship that the Buddha prescribed for a teacher and a student is one of an apprenticeship. The word antevasika, which they use for the student of a mentor in the monkhood, is the same word for apprentice in all kinds of occupations. The various protocols of the apprentice, how the student is supposed to behave in relationship to the preceptor, in relationship to the mentor, are very much an apprentice kind of relationship. You live together. In fact, that's the word for the student who lives with a preceptor. Sadimviharika, one who lives together. You live with your preceptor. You spend a lot of time with the preceptor. You regard the preceptor as your father. The preceptor is supposed to regard you as his son, and you really look after each other. When the preceptor's sick, you look after him. When you're sick, the preceptor looks after you. You learn to get sensitive to the preceptor's needs because you're not just trying to pick up verbal knowledge from him. You want to gain a sense of him as a person in all sorts of situations. What did this person learn from the training when he was apprenticed? What kind of qualities did he pick up? I don't know if I can exemplify all the qualities that Ajahn Fuang exemplified, but one quality in particular that I really felt comfortable with, and I really admired him for, was his solidity in the face of antagonism. There were pressures from the local people to drop this rule, drop that rule, play favorites this way or that, and he wouldn't give in, He was solid across the board. If that meant being unpopular, that was perfectly fine with him. Once he was going to choose the treasurer for the monastery, and he finally spotted someone he felt he could trust. But just to make sure, he asked the guy a question. It was an interesting question. He said, "Which would you prefer, to be popular or to be wealthy?" And the guy said, "I'd rather be wealthy because if you have money, you can buy popularity." Ajahn Fuang liked the answer. Take that and think about it for a while. When you're dealing with someone who's caring for the money at the monastery, you don't want someone who's concerned about being popular. That sort of person will give in to pressure one way or another to misuse the monastery funds. And sure enough, I saw the treasurer have to stand up to a lot of pressure, successfully. He was a good example to be around. So learning the Dhamma is not just a matter of reading books and understanding the words in the books. It's a matter of picking up good habits of observing, habits of walking, and habits of looking, talking. Everything you do is part of the training, which is why the Dhamma is not so much something you find in books. It's a quality of the heart you can absorb over time by being observant. This is something that's lost nowadays. People think they can read the Dhamma and interpret it in whatever way they want and then set themselves up as Dhamma teachers. I was just reading recently someone saying, well, as we all know, meaning is a construct, meaning is something you create. So everybody has the freedom to read whatever meaning they want out of the text and nobody can say that anyone else is wrong. With that attitude, the Dhamma becomes just one more thing to be creative about. But that wasn't the Buddha's purpose in teaching. His purpose was to lay out the steps of what's required to put an end to suffering, what works and doesn't work. And he learned what works and doesn't work by testing things in action. Then, when he had tested the Dhamma and tested himself, he taught the Dhamma and set up a social framework to help pass the entire body of skills along. So, the texts are there within a context. The teachings of the Dhamma, the rules of the Vinaya, are all in this context of the apprenticeship. Picking up qualities of the heart, picking up a sense of values from being around someone whose behavior is Dhamma. After all, the whole idea of putting an end to suffering is a very strong statement of values right there, that this is the important issue in life. When the Buddha was talking about the Four Noble Truths, he wasn't just telling us information about the Four Noble Truths. He was asserting a value, that this is the most important way of looking at things to help attain the most important goal you can set for yourself, putting an end to suffering. So to understand him, You have to understand not only the words he uses to describe suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path to its cessation. You have to understand why all this is important, why he gives this such high priority. When Westerners first encountered the text out of context, they'd say, "Oh, this is a very selfish, very narrow approach to spiritual life." But my experience of going to Thailand and living with the Ajahns was these were not selfish or narrow people at all. They really had something special and they wanted to share it. This was evident in everything they did. So there's the aspect of the Dhamma that you can pick up only by being around people who've trained in the Dhamma, who have been trained by their teachers who in turn were well trained, people who've been willing to apprentice themselves, to pick up the values. In the past, this aspect of direct personal example was highly valued, not just in the area of the Dhamma, but in terms of other skills as well. There are a lot of old skills that used to be practiced in Thailand that have died out because the teachers didn't see anyone worthy of passing them on to. And the question of worthiness had to do with the character of the student. I once became friends with a woman in Bangkok, Pa Pha, who had been born in the palace. Her father had been the head musician of the royal orchestra composed of xylophones, gongs, and other classical Thai instruments during the time of Rama VI. So Pa Pha was born in the palace and spent her childhood there, part of which involved learning how to cook from the palace cooks. And she learned her lessons well. She knew all kinds of clever and unusual cooking skills. Even after she had left the palace and had to make a living on her own after her husband died, she developed a really good reputation as a cook. In fact, other women came to study with her. She told me once, though, that one woman in particular, a mutual acquaintance, was really begging her to teach her how to cook, and her response was, "I don't want to teach this woman, she's too flighty." You may not think that flightiness had anything to do with cooking, but her attitude was that she had something really valuable in her cooking knowledge, and she didn't want to waste her time training someone who didn't have the character to be a good cook. As far as I know, she ended up teaching only 3 other people how to cook, and her highest praise for me one time was when she said, "You know, if you were a layperson, I'd teach you how to cook." I took that as a huge compliment. So what we're learning here is not just the words. It's a quality of the heart and a quality of the character. If you're open to learning that dimension, these are the things you have to look at. Gaining a sense of yourself, gaining a sense of time and place, gaining a sense of how much is enough, how much is too little, how much is too much, getting a sense of how to behave around different groups of people, and then gaining a sense of how to judge people by their character so that you start judging yourself by your character. You need to develop integrity in order to know what integrity is. All of these qualities go together and they play a huge part in the training. So it's not just a meditation technique that we're learning here, and not just a few statements about the truth. We're learning how to be a true person, a person of integrity, trying to adopt and live up to the same standards the Buddha used when he defined what a person of integrity was.